And welcome back to Mixed Media Live. Look at that. That actually worked this time. Smooth. Good. 5 seconds. It's awesome to see people filtering in. I think we're going to have a pretty awesome show going forward today. But before all that, we've got to introduce the podcast. We've got to introduce ourselves. So my name is Irving. I'm a media entrepreneur. And this is Mixed Media. We're a weekly podcast happening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Fridays every week, where we talk about art, whether it's philosophy of art or the business of art or reviewing art, or as it happens today, we're going to be interviewing a few people. So that's going to be pretty fun. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's what mixed media is. So you guys can introduce yourselves.
Hey, I'm Nathan. I'm a 3D modeler and a game developer.
And I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flutist, flautist, flute player, however you want to say that, and a media composer.
All right, and we've got two people waiting to talk to us in their segment in the background, but I'll hold off on introducing them for just a moment. Awesome, we've got a ton of people filtering. That's awesome to see. So, first of all, Happy New Year. Happy 2022. It's a whole new year for the podcast. It's the first stream. We've been gone for 2 weeks. It simultaneously sort of flew past and also felt like a long time since the last time that we've done this. I forgot to do something, though, before I started the stream. And I promise you this is not a... I'm not being, bothersome about this, or I'm not trying to convince you or anything like that. But I forgot to turn off the locals promotion for the season, right? I had a locals promotion going for like most of December, basically, and I was supposed to turn it off like January 2nd. And I forgot to do so.
Originally a Black Friday sale?
Yes. Oh, actually, yes. You're right. It was now I extended it because I wanted to encourage people, give people time, encourage people to get onto our locals page and support us. But I actually did legitimately forget to turn it off. So I will try to remember the best I can after the show to go turn it off when I post the link to the stream on locals. I will go ahead and turn it off afterwards if I remember. So you've got about, 2 hours to take advantage of something like 20% off of our monthly, which gets you some awesome perks, including this live whiteboard over here on the right of the screen. There you go. This is a live whiteboard. Here, I'll draw on it. There you go. See, I can doodle. If you want to draw, if you're an artist of any kind, for $3 a month, you get access to that live whiteboard. And also, if we can speak to your art in any way, shape, or form, I'm a filmmaker. I also can do photography, like brand stuff, a lot of media stuff I can review. Ben obviously can review music, Nathan gaming and 3D models, I think, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you want to get featured in one of these podcasts, just join our community at mixedmedia.locals.com. You can also go to mixedmediapodcast.com, which has a link to everything. As you can see, I crossed out the normal link that's at the bottom there because we got our own domain, mixedmediapodcast.com. So that's exciting. Yeah, am I missing anything?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess Ben can take it away.
So I guess today I'm going to be kind of talking to a composing pair and talking about their piece, and also, chatting with them a little bit about who they are and what they do. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
All right. I'm Leah, and I'm a math major, and that's me. And I'm a flute player. There we go.
Okay. Okay.
My name is Kat. I was a horn player in high school. Got into composing because I like it better instead of performing, because performance is draining. And now I pretty much compose a bit of freelance and stuff like that.
Cool.
Much better introduction than mine.
So we've done, for our audience members, we've done some of these segments before where, I found some people mostly on Reddit through, I think, our composer, the subreddit. I think I've maybe talked to some people from some other places. But yeah, so, your piece kind of stood out to me. But before we get into that, so you briefly gave me a little bit about your musical background. But, you guys are both, so I don't really know much about you, but I did look at both of your YouTube channels, and my goodness, you are both really prolific composers. I don't know how on earth you guys write so much, so consistently, and put it out there. So you guys are doing like a lot of really great stuff. It's a lot of it, and is really consistently put out there, which is fantastic. And again, you kind of maybe briefly touch on that in your very short intros to yourselves. But first off, like how did you get into composition, and then how did you like get into composing in such a like prolific manner?
Okay, so I'm being pointed at to go first by Kat, but I started composing when I was like 14, and I sucked at it, so I stopped for a while. And then when quarantine happened for COVID, I was like, well, now I need something to do while I'm at home forever. So I got back into composing and became more serious about it. I got Sibelius and Note Performer, and I tried to actually be better at it. And I started listening to more music, and same with like what Kat said, performing can be draining, and I just discovered that I like composing better than actually playing my instrument. So that's how I got into it.
As far as myself, right out of high school, I graduated in 2017, and I had a line into college with a horn scholarship. I didn't want to do that, so I turned it down and took like, God, how many was it? Like 3.5 gap years, where I did nothing but self-practice, self-study. I listened to beyond amounts of music, and I wrote beyond amounts of music, as I'm currently on like piece 260, 270.
How many of those are symphonies?
Yeah, 7 symphonies at this point. A ballet.
And these are like 45 minutes, an hour long like pieces. I mean, that's...
Yeah. The ballet is 2 hours long, and it took me 3 years to write.
Meanwhile, I struggle with one like 2-minute song.
Yeah, so like, see, I don't really fall in the class. I as a musician, I fall in the classical world, instrumentalist, right, and also the media world. But as a composer, I pretty much have only been involved in other than things I've written for myself, right? Mm-hmm. Only things that are in the media world. And in the media world, like, which that kind of like the ability to just write stuff and consistently write stuff is a really great talent. It's maybe a little bit different in like the purely classical world of art, music. Yeah, that's incredible that you just can keep throwing all that stuff out there so consistently. Like, think about media composition, where that's what you do all day. It's like, well, I have to write, for a film, you average like 2 minutes of music a day, or for TV, you average like 8 minutes of music you have to write a day. Like, that's hard for people to do.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing with media composition as opposed to freelance or people who compose for themselves, is that in media, you have to do it and it's a job. But when you compose for yourself, it's something you're doing for free. Like, you just enjoy doing it because it's what you're good at or not good at. It doesn't matter as long as you enjoy it. But if you have that, you don't have those deadlines and that pressure from a studio to get music out to them.
See, I don't know. I personally like deadlines because I was working today on this piece that I've mentioned on our podcast a couple of times that, is just for myself. And like, I've kind of been sitting on it since about July 4th last year. And like, I have like the main idea, like, but I need some pressure if I'm going to, come out with something.
And that's a fair point. Deadlines definitely help a lot of people move along, but for me, I've never worked well with deadlines. So I found it easier to just kind of compose in my free time, and then I found out I knew how to do it the way I wanted to, so I just kind of ran from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're mostly self-taught then?
Entirely
In composition?
I also.
Interesting. Okay, so neither of you have like done any formal, composition, or even like have you done music theory?
I've taken one music theory class.
And
in
I've taken
college.
one music theory class in high school and the same one in college. So we each know what the major scale is. That's what we were.
That's and everything else you know about theory you've just taught yourself.
Yeah.
That or from performance.
Oh yeah.
Orchestration too? Are you just like score studying?
Yes, I do a lot of that. I have a whole shelf of my bookshelf of just complete scores.
And orchestration books.
Orchestration books. I have Rimsky-Korsakov's orchestration book and
That other little one.
a little orchestration book that's like the orchestration dictionary or something like that.
Samuel Adler is kind of it's a great one if you don't have that, but very good orchestration book. Norman Ludwin's his books on orchestration, and all of his stuff are fantastic. For like having no formal education, you guys both have a really fantastic grasp of orchestration, form, a whole bunch of really fundamental things. So that's really fantastic that you guys have, done that all on your own.
Yeah, it's not easy, that's for sure. I mean, it took me a long time before I got where I was confident enough to say that I know what I want it to sound like and I know how to make it sound like that. But at this point, I don't give myself any credit because there's still so much to learn. But I do say I know what I want and I know how to do it.
That's great. I mean, also it's good to have some of that confidence in yourself and your own style. How would you describe, both of you? How would you describe your like respective styles? If you can say that you have one.
You get to go first.
I get to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd say that I like to classify myself as far as music in the modern era of classical music. So that kind of Russian modernism sound is what I try to go for a lot of things.
Stravinsky all the time.
Stravinsky a lot of the time is my main influence. I like him quite a bit. But honestly, there's a bunch of stuff I do. I don't like to stick to just that. I've done romantic, pure classical, jazz, funk, anything that I can attempt, I think I've done at this point.
And I don't know. I was influenced a lot by Kat to write music, so I kind of follow along the same I guess influences and inspirations, but I don't really know exactly where mine falls. I just know that I listen to a lot of like modern or romantic composers, and I don't know if Bruckner, I was told to say.
Well,
no, I like Liszt and Bruckner and Stravinsky. They're probably my three favorites.
I don't know how active you guys are on the, our composer subreddit. Do you guys ever? I know that's where I found this piece, but like, do you guys ever go on, like, look at what people post on there?
Yeah, I'm on there all the time. I listen to a lot of what people post. Kat doesn't use Reddit, but you found me on Reddit. That's yeah. I definitely listen to a lot of the music on that subreddit.
Do you feel like the general attitude on that Reddit is that your kind of music, which is like my impression of listening to like samples of both of your works, that is kind of somewhere in between like romanticism and like 20th century modernism. It's not really either of those things, but do you feel like the attitude is very much against that kind of music there?
I mean, I've had luck when I've posted my stuff. I think my Symphony, which I have no idea where it falls in terms of style, but it definitely, I got like quite a bit of good feedback there. I haven't really had any negative feedback, so I would say that the predominant like styles that are posted aren't that, but I don't think that, at least from my perspective, I don't see the subreddit having much against it, but it's definitely not what is talked about and posted most, if that helps.
I don't know. I'm asking that because I've spent a lot of time on it this past week, and there's some people like every day someone's gonna post like, why does nobody write like Tchaikovsky? and they get annihilated by people. So not too right like Tchaikovsky.
I think I remember that exact post. Yeah.
Yeah. Blurb says that he thinks your style is a family of the modern era. Yes, that's true. But I would say that, and I think you'll get this if you listen to it. You haven't abandoned large scale form or melody. Keep it simple, right?
No.
You haven't abandoned those sort of things. So yeah, not really romantic, but like some romantic sensibilities, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's something I like to do, is I like to put a bit of everything into my pieces, just so there's a sense of familiarity, but also a sense of newness, and that every piece can stand on its own as something that's just a little bit of everything, if that makes sense. I know I just said that twice, but just something from today, yesterday, tomorrow, just whatever I can put in there.
Yeah, I mean, you sound like a Mahler, right? Like a symphony must contain the whole world.
Yes, exactly. I do like Mahler quite a bit, so.
I don't know nothing, but I love Mahler. So
that is the correct opinion.
Yeah, Ben basically. So I was roommates with Ben in college at Hopkins, which is the joke we were making at the top. You studied Russian music, of course, and you were like, Russian music's cool, basically, in 10,000 more words than that. And I was like, okay, let me go explore. And then I found Mahler, and I kind of fell in love. So,
yeah. See, and I've said this on the show before. Mahler is great for like 5 minutes, and then I just can't take it any longer.
If you have the patience, Mahler is great.
I don't know about the patience. It's just too emotionally overwhelming.
That's
fair.
Also fair. Another
Another interesting thing that we'll get more into this in a second, about into the actual piece, but this is a collaborative piece.
Yep.
Yes.
Which is interesting because I've never really collaborated with anyone on composition side. Doing things in media music, you do like it's a collaborative thing, but I'm the composer. I don't know. I've never had an experience like that. So can you talk a little bit about that process of how how did that work? Did someone like take the lead on certain things, or someone have like an idea they wanted to start off with?
Yeah, so for like a year and a half now, I've been saying we need to collab. So finally, while we were like seeing each other in person, I was like, okay, we're doing this now. And so she was like, I think I might have something we can start with. So she had the first like minute of it. And then she sent it to me, and I like just did my section based off of that. It's sort of like round robin, when you write like a section each, but we also like went back through and like edited each other's stuff and melded it together better and combined ideas. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, it's just, I basically had the first minute and a half done, and I was like, I don't know where to go from this. Do you want to work on it? And she was like, yes, we've been needing to collab. And then she added some stuff, and I was like, oh, cool, I know how to add on that. And we just, like she said, just built and edited each other's works, and it turned out to be however long it is and whatever it is now.
That's interesting. I would not like my expectation if I'm collaborating with someone. I just imagine I would like it would be pretty integrated. It wouldn't be like one section by one section. So that's interesting. That's how you went about it. Did you have any like disagreements, any friction? Like, no, that's an absolutely terrible musical idea.
Well, I was gonna say we didn't really. I mean, we did do it like section, like we each added more time to it, but we were like going back and editing everything and like rearranging stuff. So I don't think we really did it section by section, but to answer your question, no, I don't think we really had any disagreements.
No, it was a pretty smooth process, honestly. I mean,
well, it took a couple days too. We just passed back and forth a few times and went pretty well.
But that also helps because she is my significant other, so we have a bit better communication than I think most people would.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. You see, like, a number of composition teams or songwriting teams, involve close relations, like brothers, like the Gershwins, or I'm struggling to remember the name of what's the name? They have different last names, but the songwriters for like Frozen, Lopez and what Anderson Lopez. I can't think of their names off the top of my head. It's really bad. I should know that. Or like the Dana brothers, film composers. People who are like married or siblings. Often you see kind of composing or like songwriting together. So that's, I think, it probably does make it easier if you have some kind of relation with the person. At least it seems that way from the professional world. So
Yeah.
I mean, I just imagine that like I would disagree with someone, but I wouldn't voice my disagreement with them. I would just be mad about it. So.
Well, we critique each other's works all the time, so we're kind of used to how to talk about it and stuff. We had a similar idea for the piece was going to go anyway, so it ended up being pretty smooth. I mean, it probably didn't have to be that smooth. There's definitely been pieces we've disagreed about, but that one just had a pretty clear idea.
For one of the games I've been working on, I was involved in making some of the music with it, and it was weird because originally I was the only composer, and then we eventually added another composer, which is an odd idea to do like mid-game, right? We did it anyways. We needed some help, and I ended up doing programming stuff anyways. But so the way we sort of like split it up was, I mean, maybe somewhat detrimental, but it ended up working out, I guess, because essentially I wrote, I guess, the basic part of a song, right? And I intentionally left space open in certain ranges and stuff like that, in certain parts for my co-composer to write stuff in, right? I think the problem with that, though, is it comes off seeming very standard because I essentially followed a very standard format in order to create space in expected ways, if you get what I'm saying. So it's very repetitious in how it creates space and stuff like that. And that's just so like, I didn't want him to have to conform to like a very specific like idea that I already had. So I think it ends up coming up maybe somewhat generic, but also has this weird two-styled thing going on with it, which is interesting. And as for criticism, I guess usually after we create a song, either myself or him, the whole team just like, regardless of whether you're involved in music or not, just listens to it and then critiques it, right? And usually we have to go back and fix something, or not everyone's gonna like every part, whatever, and make compromises or whatever. So I think in that sense, it worked out nicely because nothing was ever taken too personal because we would do it anyways, right? We had to criticize each other anyways by force, essentially, as it's just the way things went. But yeah, I think it worked out all right.
Yeah, so that's, I think it's a really cool thing to be able to do. Maybe one day I'll do it with someone, but yeah, I don't know. So we'll see. We'll get to the piece here in a second. So the title of this piece is The Judas Cradle. So can you explain like what that means, what you're thinking of with this piece, what the idea is, if there is one?
A lot of our music is quite dark. If you saw the titles of a lot of
that's pretty obvious. If anyone listening, go look through, definitely listen to their music. They have, like I said, a lot of it, and it's all good. But yes, just even if you don't listen to it, you look through the titles, and you got some less dark things, but a lot of pretty dark titles at least.
Yeah. And so the Judas Cradle, we finished the piece and we're like, well, what do we call this monster? And so the things that we normally gravitate towards, mythology, like religious stories and monsters and torture. Kat's got a piece called Burned Alive. So we looked up at the Wikipedia page for torture devices or whatever, and we came across the Judas Cradle, which I'm not going to explain in detail, but if you see the thumbnail for the piece, it's like a spike that you get impaled by from behind, and that's...
We'll leave it at that.
Yep.
Okay, so something really pleasant.
Oh, yes.
Yes, very much so.
Yep.
Okay, so I had not realized that this is about a torture device.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. So I kind of assumed that you had looked it up and were asking us to clarify.
Oh no,
sorry.
It doesn't. I mean, my impression of the piece based on the title and then just listening through it once was definitely kind of a how do I want to say this? It kind of was in the land of witches' Sabbath music, sort of. It's not like we're not quite at like Berlioz Symphony Fantastique, and like some of the tropes of that, but I think the piece that really like came to my mind is Mussorgsky's Night on Bald Mountain.
Someone commented that actually, and someone else commented on the Reddit post. They said it reminded them of a czar getting murdered.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean,
this piece isn't even like super dark. Like Kat literally wrote a ballet about
witches. Yeah, I have a ballet that was based off of Symphony Fantastique, and it's not based on,
inspired
by, and it's about witches. And
I mean,
cool.
It has some of that quality, and it's also like if you were looking at it all on our Discord, I was writing I wrote in the music page, section, although I meant to write it in the film section. I was talking about how I was watching Andrei Rublev yesterday, which Russian, witches' Sabbaths and torture, and it's like an epic of all that. So it's also on my mind as well, and I think your piece fits in with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can turn to the piece now if you want, but before we do, anything else you want to say about it? Anything else we should know?
I don't think so. Do you have anything?
Just brace yourself.
Well, the beginning's not bad.
None
of it's bad.
I
It's
mean,
great if you like that kind of music. It's a little intense.
If you get scared easily.
Okay.
Should I play it?
Yeah, why don't you take it away, Irving? You guys feel like that was a representative select? Well, I don't know if you could hear it or not, but
Yeah, we listened to it on the YouTube one.
okay. Do you feel like that was representative of the work?
Yeah.
I'd say so. Yeah.
Okay. So
Go check out the links for sure, though, if you want to hear it in much better quality than probably what's being streamed at.
It sounded great on the YouTube video.
Oh, that surprises me. That's awesome.
yeah, so my thoughts on that. So I've already mentioned, I think it's very well done. Overall, great orchestration, good sense of form, and what you do a good job is kind of integrating both melody and kind of a core idea. And I think it's pretty obvious what your core idea is generally the tritone, but in particular you have like root, tritone, and then half step above it. So like root, tritone, and perfect fifth. So for our audience members, those are it's kind of a interestingly dissonant interval. So a tritone is probably the most dissonant interval in music, and it is kind of has a very strong association in Western music with with Satan. But at the same time, you also have that minor second, which is the other most dissonant interval in Western music, equal tempered music. So you're combining the two most dissonant intervals with each other, and it's kind of like the kernel of what you're doing. Well, that is clearly like the dominant idea of this piece. I have to say, I don't really mean I'm disappointed, but I'm kind of disappointed though that there's no Dies Irae in there. You got this
ballet.
I mean, I don't know. You got this kind of satanic interval, right? We've got a piece about a medieval torture device, and we don't have Day of Wrath. But that's I'm kidding when I say I'm disappointed. But I mean, it would be so stereotypical if it were in there. Yeah, I think your overall structure works well. And again, you integrate like that main idea with really solid rhythmic idea that you maintain, and you have melodies that you've built on top of that, and they're clearly identifiable. Like I was saying earlier, that's that kind of like modern, but you haven't abandoned like the late romantic era. And there's a lot of variety in there too. Obviously, you need some of that to sustain a piece for what is it, like almost 12 minutes. But you definitely have some of that in there. I've come across plenty of pieces, especially on Reddit, where people like write a 10-minute thing, and I'm like, there's one thing that happened and you repeated it like for 10 minutes.
There's 1 minute of content here. Didn't need to be.
So my general thoughts, and I do have a number of them, so I'm gonna try and keep them short. My first thought is, like I said, when I listened to this, my mind immediately went to Night on Bald Mountain, and in particular the original version of it. It's an important piece for me too. I don't know that I've actually spoken about this on our show, but that's the piece, like the first piece of music of any kind that I can remember listening to, not the original version, the Rimsky-Korsakov kind of made up version of it. And yeah, like, when I was like 3 or 4 years old, I loved putting that on and like running around and making up stories to it. So it is a very important piece to my musical background, even though I prefer the original now. And for reference, that's a piece that is, at least in its original version, literally, again, a witch's Sabbath on the eve of St. John's feast day. The Rimsky-Korsakov kind of self-made version of it. It ends with the church bells of Moscow ringing and the witches flee and there's peace, but it's not what happens in the actual piece. My mind went to that, and I think it's I think it's a helpful piece to think about, like, some of the things that I'm going to talk about, and like how we can, how things could be maybe a little bit more effective. So to me, the first thing a couple of things. The first thing that stood out to me is not that you don't use percussion. Your percussion does not have a lot of variety in it. You've got your, I think, tam-tams, bass drum, and snare. And snares plays like a pretty effective role in it. But I think something like this, there's a lot of drama you could add by having more percussion. I'm thinking like cymbals, triangles. There's ways to use it that I think can really help build the climaxes that you want to build. Add some more different kinds of color. So I don't know. I'd love to see some more percussion, just in general, in this piece. What you have is used effectively, but I think, and maybe you don't, you think that that's like you want to stick with the colors which you have, which is fine. To me, I think some more percussion colors could be really cool. And if you listen to the Night on Bald Mountain, the original version, some fantastic percussion colors that really like enhance, key moments. You don't have to use like all like 5 percussionists every measure, right? Save them. Percussion is like best saved for when it's most effective. But I think that would really help build some drama in some key moments. The other big thing that stood out to me is there's a lot of octaves in this piece. And yeah. And it's a great effect, but, and this kind of gets into another kind of point. Like you're pretty restrained with your colors that you use. You're also pretty restrained with range generally. There are some exceptions, like that really, like the really high E flat on the violins. And I don't know, like whether you're, hope that something like a piece like this gets performed one day or not. So generally, like, keeping the range restricted, you make it available to like more players, lower levels, but you also kind of restrict the colors a little bit, and it can be an intentional choice. Like I wouldn't say, for instance, if you look at Night on Bald Mountain, Rimsky-Korsakov is much more colorful in his interpretation of the main ideas than the original Mussorgsky's, and it's a color choice. If you stick with a ton of octaves for a really long period of time, it can get a little bit tiring on the ear. It's a short enough piece, but I feel like there's some more opportunities in there. And one of the things along with that is that you use a lot of auxiliary instruments, right? Like for our audience members, not like, the primary instruments would be like, flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon, trumpet, right? You're using a lot of like, so we call the auxiliaries, like instruments that are related to those main instruments, but have different ranges and different characteristics. So you have piccolo in there, you have English horn, contrabassoon, bass clarinet, no soprano clarinet, which that might have worked in there. But a lot of the ways that you use the auxiliary instruments, especially auxiliary woodwind instruments, I would say they tend to do a lot of doubling, and they're in octaves or in unison. And these instruments, they do that a lot in real, not real music, just in music, right? In real life, they do that. But if you're going to bring them in, you want to use their colors and their characteristics a little bit. And I kind of felt like there are some spots where you don't really take full advantage of that. So for instance, like the very opening, when you have the very opening notes for the flute and piccolo, a good example. So I gravitate to that because I'm a flute and piccolo player myself, and you have them playing in unison. I'm going to think about the piccolo specifically. The flute part is fine, but I look at the piccolo, and I have nightmares looking at that personally. Now, you can disagree with me because I know Leah, but you're a piccolo player, so feel free to totally disagree with me. But I see that, and my brain jumps to flute, Prokofiev's flute sonata, and the triplet low E's, and to put it in piccolo, it's even worse. Like, oh geez, that's never going to speak. So my as a flute player first, and I might not recognize this just as a composer, I look at that and I'm like, why not just take it up an octave and it will speak better, and it'll be an octave higher than the flute. But what's the problem with that?
Just quick thing to say is I did do a lot of playing around with the octaves of flute, of the piccolo and stuff, because as a piccolo player, I love playing high notes all the time. But it might have just been note performer and the specific sounds of the software. But when we brought it up, it kind of, first of all, with the high violin, those didn't play nicely together, and it just sort of took something away when I would bring things up an octave. So we kind of just put them back down. So it was a conscious decision and maybe not one that you'd agree with, but that's just what ended up happening.
Yeah, I mean, I just use that as an example. I mean, you totally do not have to agree with me, but that's the kind of thing that I know that if you put this piece in front of me, I'll play it, and then as soon as you walk off the stage, I'm going to turn to the flute player and I'm going to say, "What on earth was that measure?"
Mm-hmm. Or you'd play it up an octave, or you'd get your flute out and play it on flute instead.
I mean, so you don't have to agree with me on that specific instance, but I think a lot of times, when you use these auxiliary instruments, there's a lot of like color opportunities with them. If they're not just kind of in unison and octaves, like letting them do something that is them. I think that could be really effective. You do not have to, like, if you listen to Night on Bald Mountain, okay, you do not have to do anything nearly like what he does, where the piccolo is absolutely ridiculous, and he's using the piccolo like, and all the auxiliary instruments, he's using them, like as connective tissue and like phrase ends. Oh, I'm seeing this large run kind of thing. I'm not saying anything like that, but I think something to think about, whether you can extract more color from some of these auxiliary instruments if you're going to use them. So again, that flute piccolo thing just is an example that stood out to me just personally, but like, and you don't have to agree with that, but I think just in general, something to keep in mind. You do like your pianissimos too. And I wonder in real life whether you want to bump that up a little bit, because I think the players are just naturally going to do it, because some of those, like, I can point to some specific things, like the flutes that measure 88 and 141. Are they really going to play that?
Is that the like D and E flat, or what part is that?
I think that's like just like randomly.
Yeah, so there's definitely, I think a lot of what, since we've never really had anything performed, but a lot of what we do is working in Sibelius with note performer, and so obviously, the version that's for Sibelius to read, is going to have more extreme dynamics than I think what, we might edit it to hand to a performer. But the point we're trying to get is like, just be as quiet as possible here and be as loud as possible here. But no, we understand that isn't always possible, up to interpretation. Okay,
yeah. So I just something to be careful about it if you do start getting people to actually perform these, that they either will probably ignore that or you won't hear it. So yeah. Also, don't be afraid of the high range of the piccolo.
I know. I think you should see some of my other music. I have very high piccolo music. Don't worry.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that would make some of it a little more menacing, personally. Okay. But that's my opinion as someone who plays a lot of piccolo. There are a few like notational things, and like ignoring like things that are just things you have to play around with in Sibelius, and make sure like layout, like ignoring those things. Make sure, especially if you ever do get people to perform your music, make sure you indicate how many players are playing things. Like say A2, right? Like or in English notation look like A2, right? If you want like both players to play something, if you have like flute 1 and flute 2 on the same line and you don't indicate it, it's not really clear whether both should be playing it or just flute 1.
I'm going to be completely honest. We normally do that very meticulously. We just kind of didn't with this piece. Okay. So if it doesn't specifically say which instrument is playing, then it's whoever is reading the sheet music, because like one player per part, and then for the winds at least. And so if there's like flute 1 and 2 and it's in unison, then it's supposed to be the A2. We just didn't notate it in this specific piece because we were kind of not. We didn't like work on some pieces. We work on the sheet music really hard to make it presentable, and this one we just didn't. So
okay. Well, also, and probably a result too of the same thing, but make sure it's always, it's not necessary all the time, but it's always helpful to like indicate starting dynamics when an instrument comes in.
Do we not do that?
Sometimes you do a lot, but there are other times where you don't, and it's not entirely clear how loud it should be. So it'll default to like the mezzo forte that Sibelius just gives you, but in real life, players are going to probably wonder. I also, just in general, I like measure numbers and rehearsal numbers. I'm as in the media world, we like measure numbers every bar. You don't have to do that, but I like that. So
well, again, I sent you a very unedited version of the sheet music. If we were gonna like put this out someplace, and we don't do a lot of editing to our orchestral music, more the chamber music gets edited more because people might play that and people probably aren't going to play our orchestral music, but it would get edited a lot more before being sent out someplace. Like I just sent you the music because you asked to like see the instrumentation and stuff. But like we are aware that it's not up to the performance standards. That was just a rough copy that we were working with.
Yeah, no worries. I just visited, things I noticed. Yeah, and the final thing I want to say, and this is like, for me, I think the hardest part of composition is transitions between things. And most of your transitions, I think, are really great. And I know I mentioned right before we started the show that organic is going to be my word. Organic transitions are like what music is about. And generally your transitions are fantastic. And that's the area that I struggle the most with as a composer, and it helps a little bit in like media music where like you don't have to worry so much sometimes because like, well, scene changes and or the mood changes suddenly, and you follow it and nobody questions whether something like kind of ended abruptly, because it ended abruptly on the screen too. But like I don't know, I struggle a lot with trying to understand transitions. I listen to a lot of music like, how did that transition work? Probably like the biggest area things that I study with in scores. I would just say there are two spots that kind of stood out to me, and that's that kind of, I don't want to say cascading because cascading sounds downward, but kind of like the upward stepping cascading kind of transition back into your main idea, like measure 145 to 147. And to me that feels kind of, I don't know. It feels kind of abrupt, especially like just kind of slowly adding like each eighth note, adding one instrument. Again, you can totally disagree with that, but that feels kind of like, to me, it feels a little bit abrupt. And the other one is when you get into this kind of really soft section at like 175, the transition into that, you have like fortissimo or fortissimo, and then I think in live performance you probably would, allow a pause before you go right into like I think it's a flute solo, like mezzo piano. At least in note performer, there's no pause there, and that sounds really kind of like, like a kind of rupture there. Sometimes if you're gonna have like a big dynamic contrast too, sometimes I think it's effective. It can be effective to kind of have like a pause. You don't necessarily need to fade into it, but like breathe and then something quiet. Yeah, again, you can feel free to disagree with that or not, but that would be something that I don't know. I think to me, in live performance, if you had like a slight pause there, that would be really effective.
Yeah, I was just gonna say so the specific transition you're talking about right now is one that I did, and I kind of did that on purpose because I was trying to not like there were a bunch of pauses in the four measures before that, or four measures before that with all the lower parts, and I was just trying to connect like the G sharps together, and plus the timpani was playing. I was just connecting it all together. I guess I know what you mean about having a pause. I was just trying to get away from the fact that the Pascal measures had a lot of pauses in it, and I didn't want to do that too much. But a pause might also work there. I just didn't think about it. Like, I thought about it. I didn't think about putting one in. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So, I don't know. That's basically my thoughts on it. I think, really fantastic overall. Like I said, I love how you have a dominant idea and you kind of stick with that, and you got really nice form on top of it. Like the dramatic structure works very well. I love all the accelerandos.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think again, I like that you got some really strong melodies on top of it. You definitely, whether you know that it's about a torture device or not, the idea that just the sentiment conveyed even by the title is absolutely felt in your piece. Yeah, so really, really awesome job overall. I would say, if you're going to write something really large, like thick kind of stuff like this, and with octaves, and really strong rhythmic textures. So some pieces that I think of, at least that I was thinking of when I was listening to your piece and thinking about what can I say about this? Obviously, we've talked about Night on Bald Mountain, and obviously you guys are familiar with Symphony Fantastique. Two or three things, I guess, that you two more familiar, maybe more familiar, and one you probably have not heard of. The third movement of both Shostakovich's 8th Symphony and 9th Symphony have some really interesting kind of mass, like rhythmic string textures to them that you might find interesting, especially the 9th Symphony, the third movement of the 9th Symphony. It's a 2.5 minute absolute like masterpiece of writing. And another piece, again, that I'm going to guess you probably have not heard of, because this is a really obscure Russian composer, 20th century guy, called, his name is Evgeny Brucillowski. You can find him on YouTube. His 5th Symphony is one of my favorite pieces of all time. And the first movement, I think there are things to take from that too. So those are some pieces I think they may not exactly match the style of what you're like, the atmosphere of what you're going for, but I think they have some things, that you can consider in like similar styled music to what you did here. So
the first piece that came to my mind so I listened to your one of your previous episodes, so I was trying to think if you asked a question like what it reminded us of. I came up with an answer. I was going to say the Scherzo in Bruckner's 9th Symphony is the one thing that came to my mind, because it's got the rhythmic motif and the thickness of the orchestra, and it's kind of like upbeat the whole time. So that, just one more thing to add to your list. I don't know if you agree or whatever.
Yeah. I think that's another thing you can put on that list of similar-ish things, I guess.
Yeah, I'll have to check out that. What was his name?
Evgeny Brucillowski.
Thank you.
Yeah, his 5th Symphony is really wonderful. Kind of hard to find. He's not someone you're gonna find on like Spotify or anything. So I thought that was fantastic writing, especially for people who are kind of doing this on your own and without, really any formal, much formal music theory. It's really remarkable to put something of this scale and quality together. So really awesome job. Keep up the great work, and I will keep following both of your channels and listening to what you come up with.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will say my uneducated opinion, which is that it was a very white-knuckling experience listening to your music, if that makes any difference to you from a layman, and that it was pretty awesome. So
thank you.
That was a pretty long interview, but it was really interesting, I gotta say. Chat was making me crack up the entire time, I gotta say.
Yeah, we were watching along too. That was pretty funny.
Yeah. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
we're gonna
of course.
Head out since our segment's done, but we'll definitely keep up with this podcast.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everyone who's listening, definitely check out both of their pages.
For sure.
All right. Have a great rest of your podcast.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yep.
Bye.